Hi everyone, welcome back to Age Gap Love Story. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Alan. Forgot my name there for a minute.
And we are a married couple with a 32-and-a-half-year age difference. If you're new to this channel, we started it because we wanted to offer support and community and encouragement to other people in age gap relationships. So that's really our mission. We want to help make your age gap relationship successful. So today we're talking about a topic you probably saw from the title. Now, it's about managing your anxiety about losing your partner. And this topic came about because I got a message on our Instagram account, which is also an Age Gap Love Story, and somebody asked me specifically how I manage worry or fear about losing Alan. And it was very interesting because it brought back the memory that I really did go through a period of time after we were first married where I did have a lot of anxiety about what would happen if something happened to Alan. How could I survive on my own? What would I do without my partner? And it took a lot of work for me to become, I guess, feeling more, comfortable with the idea. I mean, I don't want to lose Alan, of course. Nobody wants to lose their partner, but it's not something that I worry about on a constant basis like I did before. And so I actually did a little bit of research after this person sent me the message, because I thought, well, this is something that maybe other people experience too, and I wanted to dive deeper and kind of learn more about it.
I think it's a reason that the younger of the two in an age gap relationship may decide not to proceed and make it a relationship is because of that fear. So it is an important issue.
Yeah, and of course, if you're feeling anxiety about something, then it should be addressed. And we also just want to remind you that we're not professional therapists, so if this is something you're truly suffering through, or any other issue, please do seek professional help from a therapist, because you can probably get a lot of coping skills and things like that a lot faster than suffering through on your own, like I did. So, and actually I did eventually see a therapist. I've seen a few therapists over the years, and I don't know that we exactly touched on that issue, maybe a little bit, but it's something that's, I guess I've just worked through naturally over the years. So because Alan and I now have been together going on, I think 23 years now. So actually, when I looked into it, this experience of having anxiety about losing your partner, and I think this could probably apply to any type of relationship. So this is not necessarily specific to age gap relationships, but it's called death anxiety. And when I looked it up, it said that it is kind of a normal fear that can happen when you fall in love with someone, again, someone your own age or somebody who's older or younger than you. And so when it becomes like a chronic condition, like you're thinking about it all the time, then it has another name, and I can get into that in a minute. But we do have, I think we have like 5 or 6 tips that we thought maybe could help, whether you have, like this chronic condition or it's something that you just maybe think about once in a while. We thought that some of these tips might help. And I will put these up on our website as well, which is agegaplovestory.com, so you can see those, all of our blog posts there, and we always put the links up to our episodes and try to, any resources like references or other articles that might be helpful. So please do check out our website.
An observation that I'd like to make is sort of a general observation about many things in life. The way I try to look at things, and I can't always do it, but I try because emotions make this approach difficult. But you look at the risk and reward on a scale, and every aspect of life has a certain degree of risk and a certain degree of reward. And it's up to you to use your good judgment as to the balance between that risk and reward. So in this specific case, we're talking about a relationship that may provide you with the benefit of a loving companion and a degree of security depending upon other issues in your relationship with that individual. And then the risk, of course, is that relationship going to be long-term, or could it be short-term because that individual is older and may predecease you? So you have to think about this, and are the benefits great enough to exceed the disbenefits or the risk? And that's a decision you have to make. I mean, it's, for example, if you buy a used car, is the risk of that used car going to be that it may fail before you get enough useful life out of it to make it worthwhile for you? Or is it going to last a long time? So it's really difficult to quantify those things. You have to apply experience and judgment. And to a large degree in a relationship, of course, it's an emotional thing. And if you're really in love with somebody, if it's making your life better now, then it appears that the rewards may be greater than the risk. So again, try to balance that out and think about it on somewhat of a rational basis.
So are you comparing yourself to a used car?
Actually, my tires are bald and my battery's a little weak, but otherwise there's some mileage left. I'm a retread.
Okay, so let's get into our tips. And again, this is when you're dealing with some anxiety about losing we're going to say losing your older partner. Although Alan is going to jump in and maybe offer some of his tips as well. So the first one is try to understand and appreciate this fear of loss that you're dealing with. And when I did do the research on this topic, it was funny because it said that the fear of losing someone you love in general can come from childhood trauma, including parental neglect. And so I thought that was really, really interesting because that is an experience that I have had, emotional neglect from my parents. And so I think it's really interesting that I did suffer this fear of losing Alan, and I did have that childhood experience. And so the resource that I came up with, that I found, which I will link to in the description box, said that this fear you have as an adult may come from a fear of abandonment that developed in childhood. So, understanding that, although it doesn't make it go away, I think understanding where some of these things come from can be helpful. And as I mentioned, there is a name for this condition if it's chronic, and it's called thanatophobia, which is Thanto. It's a Greek word, and I think it's like fear of death is what it translates to, and it can be fear of losing a partner, it could be fear of losing a child, or anyone that you love. And so the research that I found said that some of this, the research that I found showed that there was at least a few studies showed that this fear of losing someone can peak in both men and women in their 20s, but can reoccur in women in their 50s. So that's, I think, just pretty interesting. And so I was in my 20s when I had this fear of losing Alan. It was almost like I didn't really have an experience of losing someone. I mean, so Alan was somebody who I was really attached to, of course. And then just the idea of losing him, I don't know, it was like intolerable. It was completely intolerable to me, and produced a lot of anxiety.
Well, on that happy note, we'll move.
Well, I mean, that's why we're doing this, because we don't want, if you are experiencing this, I just remember how painful it was. And so we want to kind of shed light on these topics so you don't feel alone. That's the worst thing, is to feel alone, and that you don't just feel like you can get help when actually you can. And that there's no, like, you feel like you're stupid or you're silly for feeling this way. And of course you're not. Other people go through this too, and there is help available. Again, like a therapist could really help you work through your emotions and help you feel, more stable and develop these coping skills of how you could handle yourself if you lost your partner. Yeah, so the second tip, which I think Alan's going to address, is don't be afraid to love your partner. Even if you're afraid of losing them, you can't be afraid of loving anybody, really.
I believe it was in one of the Shakespearean plays where one of the lines was, is it better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all? And only you can make that decision. So, granted, if you've loved someone and you have a close relationship and they're gone before you have a chance to max that out, well, you have the benefit of having had that relationship, and then you have to balance that with the pain of a premature loss. As we discussed earlier, it's that risk-reward consideration that you need to make as you go in to making a committed relationship. So I would say don't be afraid to live in the moment. And most people don't really appreciate until they're much older how short life is, and how, to the extent that you can grab some happiness, you should do so. Just make sure that whatever pain you may suffer doesn't offset that happiness. I think moving on to the topic of some tips as far as reducing the damage that a loss from a loved one would create. And I'd like to kick that off by laying out a couple of practical suggestions.
Wait, is this, what part is this?
What segment are we on as far as our notes are concerned,
Yeah.
Madam Moderator? We are on plan for the future as much as
well,
possible.
I just want to say something before we move on.
Okay, say it.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, and I think just tagging on to what Alan said about not being afraid to love your partner and living in the moment, is that one thing that I've learned throughout my life is that I try not to make decisions based on fear. And so I recognize the fear. I mean, you can still feel afraid. Life is scary for sure. But if you're constantly making your life decisions based on fear, then I just feel like, that's kind of a limited life. And I feel like in a lot of ways, that's what I did. Coming out of a childhood that wasn't super supportive, and where I didn't feel really like I had a solid support system with my parents, life was really scary. And so I did make a lot of decisions based on fear. Thankfully now I'm with Alan. We have each other, we have friends, and I have a much better support network, and I feel stronger just as a person. So now when I make decisions, I don't make decisions spontaneously or without thinking them through, but I'm not making them based on fear. And so if you're deciding anything, whether it's to pursue an age gap relationship or to have children with your older partner, I mean, certainly those are complicated decisions, but we just kind of want to say just to not be scared about living life.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so now I know Alan's going to love this topic because Alan is a planner, which is great because he's helped bring some of that to me, like being organized and thinking about the future. And I know he's going to want to talk more about this. But our third tip is to plan for the future as much as possible. And in this way, it can help you reduce your anxiety about losing your partner.
I hope those of you that do follow us don't tire of my words of wisdom. But I have a couple on this topic, and one which is an old expression, and that is knowledge is power. Or to rephrase it, it is most people have a fear of the unknown, which is very common. So to the extent that you can understand the circumstances as you begin to make a committed relationship, the more reassured you'll be and the better informed you'll be as far as what risks and rewards lie ahead of you. And a few specifics on this are the health of your partner. Now, if you have a relationship with an individual, whether they're the younger or the older of the couple, you have to appreciate that if somebody is not well, that it's very likely that this could have a meaningful negative impact both on the immediate and long-term relationship, one that may demand long-term caring, perhaps shortly into the beginning of your committed relationship or somewhere down the road. So as cold-blooded as it may sound, you need to make a health assessment, of your potential partner. I know it's tough because emotions tend to rule over logic, but do consider health.
But that doesn't even have to mean that it's like a no-go, because I remember when we first started dating, you told me you had like this neck condition, and I thought you were telling me that, you were like disabled, which is fine. I mean, people get in that situation all the time. We're not saying that doesn't mean you can't move forward, but
It's not a killer. Definitely, it's not a killer of
yeah.
the relationship, as Carrie
But
said.
again, it's like knowledge is power.
Yes, you just have to make an assessment.
And fortunately, Alan's neck condition actually is one that diminishes with age, and so it hasn't become like a disabling component.
Yeah, it's a rare movement disorder where your brain basically sends false signals to a muscle group. For me, it's muscles in my neck, and it causes a compulsive, occasional pulling of my head in one direction. For some other people, they have it in different areas, different muscular issues. But anyway, moving on, the second point after a health assessment would be financial planning. And I believe we discussed in the financial planning segment of our series that early on I was able to afford to establish, before we were even engaged, a term life insurance policy on my life with Carrie as the beneficiary. So as she became more involved with me and more tied to a more permanent relationship, again, before we were engaged, I had the knowledge and the wherewithal to set up a term life insurance policy so that if anything happened to me, Carrie would have a financial nest egg to carry her forward, to adjust to continuing her life in a different direction without me. So that was, I think, an important comfort issue, sort of a blanket of comfort. Also, as part of the financial planning, as you go forward to make a commitment with a partner, and again, we discussed this in our financial segment, you need to make that assessment of the other partner, potential partner. Are they heavily in debt? Do they have tax liens? Do they have any assets? Do they have a decent job, a future? I think I mentioned in one segment about a lady who I met while I was playing blackjack in Las Vegas. And just to repeat the story, I'm sorry if it's redundant for some of you, but she was a blackjack dealer, and we were just chatting, and I noticed on her tag, in all the tags at this casino would tell where people were originally from, and she was from Phoenix. And I said, "What brought you to Las Vegas and put you in this job?" And she kind of rolled her eyes, and she said, "Well, I had a great job in Phoenix." She said, "I was a municipal employee, had an opportunity for advancement, I had a great pension plan, I was settled, I had a nice apartment, savings plan, and then I met this guy, and we fell madly in love, and he got a job offer moving to Las Vegas and wanted me to go with him, and we got engaged, and I moved here, and then 4 months later we broke up, and I lost my job, I lost my pension benefits, I lost potential, I lost everything, and I got stuck here, and now I work as a blackjack dealer in this casino." So I know it's hard because there are no guarantees in any really relationship in life, but you need to make a financial assessment. Look at the background of an individual. Are they stable? Do they have a future? Are they going to create financial problems and drag you down? Or are they stable with, like the weather? Is it stable with a chance of improvement? So you need to think about things like that, because once you get into a relationship, it's the old expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah, and I think when Ellen and I got together, and it was after we got married when I started having this growing anxiety about losing him, and it could have also been because I really did change the trajectory of my career path, whereas when we lived like in the city, before we got married, I had much more career options, and I was more like moving into like a management probably position. Whereas after we got married, we moved to like the suburbs where the job opportunities were extremely limited, and I ended up starting my own business. But before that, it was like I was kind of in this in-between position. I had made the commitment to Alan, but yet then my career options were much more limited. And so that could have been part of the reason, and it kind of goes exactly to what we're talking about, is this like making sure that you're looking out for yourself. Of course, you want to commit to your partner, but not at the expense of your own like life goals. So fortunately, it was like I'm lucky. I feel like I got the best of both worlds. I got, my amazing soulmate partner, and we're married and, live together and just love each other so much. And then I was also able to develop a career path. And I think also, like, for me, once we got married, I knew Alan didn't want to have more children. And so it's like once I committed to him, it was like, okay, I was committing to this path of my life where we're like, probably not going to have children. I wasn't sure about my job opportunities. So it was a little scary. It was definitely scary. So if you're in that situation, these are just things for you to think about, and hopefully it will help decrease your anxiety that you're feeling.
Yes, and often I take the role of a realist, which I try to be, because we live in the world of reality. It's nice to have wishes and fantasies and hopes and desires and whatever, but the rock solid, hard world is that of reality. And the couple of points I want to make here, again, this is an old expression: talk is cheap. Another expression is actions speak louder than words. So you don't want to get into a circumstance where you're basing your life on promises, 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 because you're staking your future with somebody else. And unless you're independent and strong emotionally and financially, you're going to you're going to be codependent to a degree on your partner. And you want to make sure that they're reliable.
Yeah, that's true. And we did we have some other podcast episodes like about, Alan and I had a prenuptial agreement, which I think probably helped manage his anxieties about getting remarried. We had, Alan set up a living trust where I know that I will, for instance, I'll be able to continue living in our house together once Alan's gone.
And the prenuptial also is very fair and balanced, so that if we did in fact break up, Carrie knew precisely where she would be financially with respect to my assets and estate. So the prenuptial agreement, combined with the insurance policy, combined with other factors, gave Carrie an umbrella of comfort.
Yeah, but it's not just financial. There were other concerns as well. So that's one part of it, but you do as much as you can, but the planning does help. So let's move on to tip number 4, which is to try to work on your own self-confidence, your own self-reliance, your own coping mechanisms. And this was something that I really needed help with. As I mentioned, coming from a childhood home where I wasn't really given those skills because my parents simply didn't have their own coping skills. And so I had to learn them later on. So anxiety is a real thing, and there are ways to cope. For me, medication was not an option. I don't judge anyone who takes medication, but I prefer to try to use my mind to try to, and coping skills to try to manage anxiety as opposed to taking a pill. So I learned things like journaling. I went through a program where it's like there's a few different thought processes you go through to manage your feelings and even identify your feelings. If you're just upset and you have no idea what you're upset about, the first step is to figure out what you're upset about. So anyways, again, I really think that a good therapist can Or even there's a ton of really great books and podcasts about coping skills specifically for anxiety. Um, but so that's tip number 4. And then unless you have something, we'll go on to tip number 5. We have 2, these are our last 2 tips.
I have to review my notes. What is tip number 5?
Well, it's to develop a support network.
Yeah. And for us, I think a support network is that we are fortunate to have good friends. I think we rely on each other pretty heavily. I mean, we have a very limited number of what I would call close friends, people that,
And I mean, even with COVID, that's really, it's been, of course, we can't even see our friends. It's been a year. We haven't even seen our friends.
right. So we use FaceTime or Zoom or something like that to get some face-to-face personal contact. But we have a close group of friends. And when I say friends, I mean people that if there was, heaven forbid, an emergency of some kind and we needed some help to come over or whatever, or to share either sadness or joy with, we have a small group of people we could do that with. We also have a small group of family that we're close enough to that we could do that. But that's enough for us. I think we tend to be more independent than a lot of other people. But I think depending upon your unique personality and makeup, you may need a lot of support from a wide group of friends and family, or you may not.
Well, and also I think with other age gap couples, I mean, I think I've heard this from a lot of age gap couples, that it's harder to find close friends, especially other couples. If you don't have children, it can be harder to be close with, people your age because they're just like wrapped up in their kids and you don't share that, like, because so many people have kids and then they become friends but through their kids and things like that.
Right. And we've discovered this with several of Carrie's friends, is that once they have a child, and as we don't have young children, once they have a child, their interest focused on the child, which is perfectly natural. You'd want it to be that way. And so their path diverges greatly from ours, and they cease to be close friends, more like an acquaintance or a friend from the past. And then there are also issues, which I think we may have discussed also in previous episodes, where a degree of separation occurs in lifestyle. For people that are more Carrie's age, they might have very different interests than we have because our activity levels are actually, even for Carrie, are more along the line of my activity and enjoyment and interest levels. So I mean, we don't go out to bars, we don't go dancing, we don't do a lot of things that, people that are closer to Carrie's age would do.
I love that you think that's what I would be doing without you.
Okay, well, and then people that are my age have much different activity level. So people of our age might find us a little awkward, not so much because of activity, because the wife might think, I don't want my husband exposed to a couple like that, because he might get ideas about dumping me and marrying a younger woman. So we've had circumstances like that too, but I don't really consider myself old even at 78, although I guess I am. But it reminds me of a joke from Rodney Dangerfield. He said he is so old that if he goes to Las Vegas but he gets a jackpot, he has 3 prunes.
But yeah, I think, well, I don't know. I mean, I've always been a homebody, and I have always been what do you call the opposite of a night owl? An early bird. So I'm an early bird. So I wake up really early. In fact, I wake up about an hour before Alan. So I'm an early bird, and so Alan and I both start to wind down around 4 p.m., which I guess you could be, I don't know why it's like a stereotype about older people about, having dinner at 5 o'clock or whatever, which actually we don't have dinner at 5
Yes,
o'clock.
I just have to add an aside, not really on the topic, but having worked in financial services, which is based on New York time, living in California for a good 30 years of my career in finance, I was up at 4:30 for many years, had to be in the office at 5:30. And before and after that, I had jobs where I had to be in the office at 6:30, so I was up at 5:30 or 5. So for me now to sleep till 7 in the morning is a real luxury, and
Yeah.
I love it.
Good. So I think we got a little off track there, but our point is that even though we're saying develop a support network, we're not talking about like hundreds of people. Even if you have one or two people that you can rely on, that's perfect. But it is important to have those one or two people and to make an effort to have, trust other people and be able to depend on other people. And you don't have to do everything yourself, which has been a hard lesson for me. And then our last tip is to ask for help. It's simply, if you're suffering, we just don't want you to suffer on your own, and we want to limit your suffering. So please, if you are feeling this strong anxiety, as this person who messaged me on Instagram, I felt her pain, that she was having this fear of losing her partner, and it was really holding her back. So I would say that it's natural. It's a normal feeling. It doesn't have to limit your love for your partner, and it also doesn't have to limit your life, which it can if you don't get help from some source.
Yeah, I mean, pride is a great thing, but if pride keeps you from improving yourself and your life, it's a very high price to pay for that pride. So don't be ashamed. I mean, people are not going to think less of you, whether they're friends, family, for asking for some input and counsel and reassurance. And if they do, then maybe you need to reassess how close they are to you. People, if they're close to you, should really be willing to offer advice. It's not like you're asking for money, hopefully, and you're not asking to take their car for the weekend or something that's going to be a huge imposition. Just to sit down and talk a little bit and get some input or some comfort. Just talking about a problem often makes you feel better.
Yeah, and I think the idea too is that if you're thinking about an age gap relationship and you feel like you can't get past this fear of losing that partner, I think the idea here is that this fear that you're having, so say you decide not to pursue that relationship and you find someone your own age, likely I think you're going to experience that same fear, maybe with the partner, or maybe you end up having a kid. But it's like this feeling of anxiety that you're having is probably not going to be limited just to your age gap relationship if you don't address it. So it's not a reason to not pursue an age gap relationship, is kind of the point.
And just as sort of an overall warning, is that when you do speak with someone and try to get input or advice, just like it is with anything in life, consider whether or not they are biased in one direction or another. For example, if you are going to talk to your Aunt Betty, and Aunt Betty had a relationship with an older guy who sort of chewed her up and spit her out, to be rather blunt about it, and ruined her life and made her bitter towards men in general, and you're going to ask her about a loving relationship with an older guy, Aunt Betty might say, screw him, stop him, don't do it. So Aunt Betty may not be the exact person you'd want to talk to on a situation like that.
And even therapists can be biased. I've had somebody else message me that she was seeing, trying to find a therapist who would support her through her age gap relationship. She was having a hard time finding somebody who was open-minded. The therapist kept trying to say, that it was like other issues, that daddy issues or whatever crap. So, if you are looking to speak to a therapist, it's perfectly acceptable to have like a 10-minute introductory conversation to make sure you're a good fit. And if you get any kind of weird vibes that they're biased against age gap relationships, then I would say try to find a different therapist.
Yes, and not to be critical or unreasonable about religious counselors, but many people do speak to, if they are into religion, they speak to whomever is the person in their religious organization, their church pastor or priest, whatever the case may be, about certain relationships or questions about the future relationship with a particular individual. You have to appreciate that many people who are into religious points of view can be unreasonably critical. They may say, if the person is divorced, no way. Or if the person has certain aspects of their own religion that are going to conflict with your religion. I mean, although you need to consider that if you're a very deeply religious person and somebody has contrary views, that could be an issue. But just be alert to the bias of the person that's giving you the input. Just like when you buy a car. If you walk onto a used car lot and you are not knowledgeable in cars, and you say, what's the best deal? And the salesman says, this piece of junk over here that's 3 times the real market value is a good deal for you. You know, they have a point of view, and it's not necessarily the best point of view for you.
On that note, I think we've wrapped up this episode.
Thank you very much, Dr. Forrest.
And I do have 2 references that I'm going to put that can give you additional support on this topic. So be sure to check the show notes, and feel free to reach out to us on our website or on Instagram, or we do have a private Facebook community too. And so there's lots of ways to connect with us, and we hope that you do. You could even just leave a comment on this video, and we'll see you in the next video.
Yes, and as they say at Kelsey's Bar, reach out and touch someone.
I don't know what that means. Goodbye.
Bye.